The sun was blazing over the quiet suburban street as 14-year-old Malik trudged home from school, backpack slung over one shoulder, heart heavy from another day of being overlooked. Life hadn't been easy. Every day felt like a test he didn't ask to take. But fate has a way of choosing the unlikeliest moments to change everything. When a sleek black luxury car hissed to a stop on the side of the road, Malik barely noticed. Then the driver stepped out, an older man in a tailored suit. Frustration etched across his face as he kicked the tire again. The car was stranded, helpless, and Malik's curiosity overpowered caution. Nobody expected the moment that followed would become the story that altered his path forever. A simple act of kindness, a split-second decision, and a life about to be transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Malik approached the car cautiously, his backpack slipping lower on his shoulder as the sun bore down on the quiet suburban street. His hands were smudged with chalk from schoolwork, a small reminder of the world he usually inhabited, full of homework, laughter, and the occasional argument with friends over basketball games. Today, though, the air felt different. There was a tension he couldn't ignore, a weight pressing down as the sleek black car hissed to a stop on the curb. The man who stepped out was older, dressed in a tailored suit that shimmered under the sunlight, and frustration etched deep lines across his face. He kicked the tire again, sharper this time, and Malik felt the pull of curiosity overpowering his usual caution. Nobody expected him to do anything. The world had spent years teaching him to stay in his lane, to keep his head down, to not draw attention. But something in the man's stance, the helpless tilt of his head, made Malik hesitate, and then step closer. He crouched beside the tire, the metal cold under his hands and the wrenches heavy but familiar. His father's voice came back to him in fragments. Measure twice, tighten once. Precision beats speed. Malik worked carefully, each turn deliberate, yet he could feel the eyes on him, studying, questioning, and judging. The man's expression shifted constantly, suspicion, doubt, and then faintly disbelief. Here was a young black boy alone, dirt, smudged hands gripping tools with confidence, showing skill the man hadn't anticipated. The air was thick with tension, the invisible weight of a society that had taught them both how to act, how to perceive, how to judge. Every movement Malik made seemed amplified, a test he hadn't volunteered for, a silent challenge issued by someone whose life had been cushioned by privilege. The man finally spoke, his voice sharp but tinged with curiosity. "Do you know what you're doing?" Malik didn't hesitate. He nodded, focusing on the task at hand, trying to ignore the uncomfortable stares and the lingering shadows of assumptions. The wrench turned under his hands, each click and snap echoing with more than just mechanical precision. It was the sound of defiance against the low expectations placed on him his whole life. Every bead of sweat, every scraped knuckle became a declaration that he was capable, that he belonged in spaces where people rarely imagined him present. Even as Malik worked, he could feel the subtle judgments, the hesitation in the man's eyes that spoke volumes. The world didn't easily accept talent from someone like him. It doubted it, questioned it, and sometimes tried to erase it entirely. Yet in that moment, crouched beside a flat tire, Malik felt something shift. He wasn't invisible here. His skill, his focus, and his courage were undeniable, and the man, despite himself, couldn't look away. Minutes stretched longer than Malik expected, the sun beating down on his neck as he tightened the final bolts. Every turn of the wrench was precise, deliberate, guided by countless lessons from his father and late-night practice on old bicycles and spare tires. The man stood nearby, hands in pockets, watching with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. His initial doubt hadn't fully disappeared, but it was softening, replaced by a flicker of respect Malik could feel like a physical weight. "You really know what you're doing?" the man asked, voice carrying a thread of disbelief, as though no one his entire life had ever shown him competence in such unexpected form. Malik only nodded, focusing on the rhythm of the work, ignoring the prickle of tension rising in his chest. The car seemed to hum under his hands as he checked the pressure and adjusted the alignment, each action precise but fluid, a dance he had learned without even realizing it. Around them, the street remained quiet, the usual neighborhood sounds muted, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Malik could feel the weight of eyes, not just the man's, but the invisible gaze of a society that had spent years teaching people to underestimate him. He had grown used to being ignored, dismissed, and sometimes ridiculed for stepping out of the lines drawn by others. But here, the invisible rules were bending, if only slightly, because his hands, his skill, and his quiet determination refused to be unseen. The man shifted, his posture betraying the surprise he tried to hide. He had been in boardrooms, met experts, seen people with polished resumes and flawless credentials, but never someone like this, A young black boy standing in worn sneakers with dirt under his nails, demonstrating competence in a way that forced acknowledgement. The realization seemed to unsettle him. He had built a life on assumptions, hierarchies, and control, yet here was a truth that refused to fit neatly into his expectations. Every click of the wrench, every careful adjustment became a statement, a subtle challenge to the preconceived notions both of them had internalized from the start. Malik felt his own pulse quicken, the tension in the air thick and almost tangible. He knew the moment carried more weight than a simple tire change. There was history here, unspoken layers of bias and doubt, and the small act of service he was providing was testing invisible boundaries. The man's eyes followed every movement, shifting from doubt to fascination, a silent acknowledgement that sometimes talent and courage appear where society least expects them. Malik's hands were steady, his focus absolute, and in the quiet exchange of glances and gestures, both realized that a single moment could reveal far more than a lifetime of assumptions. Then it happened. The last bolt clicked into place, and Malik stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The tire was secure, the car ready to roll, and for a brief second, the street was silent except for the faint hiss of the deflated rubber returning to shape. The man's expression was unreadable at first, a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and an almost imperceptible admiration. He extended a hand, hesitant, as if unsure whether this small gesture of acknowledgement was appropriate, or whether it could bridge the invisible gap that society had taught him to maintain. "Didn't expect that," he said, his voice catching slightly, betraying the impression that Malik's capability had shattered some long-held assumption. Malik looked up, heart still racing, and smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of pride and relief. It was a moment that carried more weight than words could describe, a recognition that his skill and courage had been seen, had mattered, and had created an opening that previously seemed impossible. The man's hand lingered for a beat longer than necessary, and Malik sensed the internal conflict in the older man. On one hand, he was grateful, impressed, and perhaps even moved. On the other, he was navigating the deeply ingrained prejudices that made him question the legitimacy of a young black boy's competence in a world that often judged by skin and background rather than ability. There was an awkward pause, charged with unspoken truths and the weight of societal expectations. Malik, despite the heat and the adrenaline, understood exactly what lingered there. The subtle bias that had conditioned the man to underestimate him, the unspoken disbelief that someone from Malik's world could do something so proficiently without instruction, without permission, without approval. Then came the unexpected. The man pulled a business card from his wallet, hesitating for a moment as though unsure if it was appropriate to extend it to someone so young. Malik's eyes widened as he accepted it, a small rectangle of opportunity and possibility that felt heavier than any wrench he had ever held. The card wasn't just a name or a number. It was a bridge into a world that had seemed unreachable, a signal that his effort had created not just acknowledgement, but potential for something bigger. In that moment, Malik felt both exhilarated and cautious, aware that opportunity often came with conditions, that the world rarely offered chances without judgment lurking nearby. He sensed the weight of both gratitude and responsibility pressing down, the understanding that this moment could mark the beginning of a profound shift in his life, even as the barriers of doubt, expectation, and prejudice remained looming just beyond reach over the following weeks. Malik couldn't stop thinking about that sweltering afternoon, the hiss of the flat tire, and the hesitant glance of the man who had watched him work with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Each time he replayed the encounter in his mind, he noticed details he had missed before. The slight furrow of the man's brow when Malik first approached, the way his posture softened as Malik's hands moved confidently over the tools, the subtle shift from doubt to recognition. At school, the memory clung to him like a shadow. Teachers still underestimated him, assigning him menial tasks or overlooking his answers in class discussions, as though his capability was invisible until proven under extraordinary circumstances. On the streets, the whispers of judgment lingered, strangers casting glances that carried assumptions about who he was and what he could accomplish. Yet beneath all of it, a quiet resilience had begun to grow within him. Fueled by the knowledge that someone powerful had seen his skill and acknowledged it, Malik began to notice the difference even in small interactions. He walked taller, held his head higher, and carried himself with a sense of purpose that had been missing before. Every time he tightened a bolt on his bicycle or helped a neighbor with a minor repair, he felt a subtle surge of confidence, a reminder that competence was not defined by appearances. The encounter with the millionaire had planted a seed. Talent could be seen, recognized, and valued even in the most unlikely circumstances. And yet, Malik was painfully aware that one act of recognition did not erase years of prejudice, nor did it dissolve the structural barriers that surrounded him. The world was still unfair, still quick to judge and slow to believe in the potential of someone like him. But now, for the first time, he carried evidence that his abilities mattered, that a single act could pierce the wall of assumptions and open doors that had long seemed locked. He thought often about the man, about the card, about the unspoken acknowledgement that had passed between them. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was a validation, quiet testament that skill, focus, and integrity could exist in places society didn't expect. Yet Malik also understood that this moment came with responsibility. The path forward would not be easy. It would require perseverance, courage, and a willingness to face continued doubt and discrimination. But he felt a shift in his perspective, a sense that he could navigate spaces that once felt forbidden, that he could assert his presence without apology. The injustice hadn't disappeared, the prejudices hadn't evaporated, but Malik had discovered a new power, the ability to persist, to show up, and to be undeniable, even when the world tried to overlook him. Months passed, and Malik's life began to change in ways he hadn't dared to imagine. On that hot afternoon beside the black luxury car, the man had kept his word, reaching out with calls and emails, offering guidance, mentorship, and access to opportunities Malik had only seen on the screens of his small bedroom. It wasn't instant success, and it wasn't easy. Each new door brought its own challenges, a mixture of excitement and pressure, and Malik quickly realized that opportunity demanded more than just talent. It demanded persistence, adaptability, and the courage to keep moving even when doubt crept in. He spent hours learning, practicing, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, determined to make every chance count. Yet even as he stepped into new environments, he carried the memory of the street, the flat tire, and the man's initial hesitation, reminders that the world often underestimated people like him. At school, things slowly began to shift. Teachers who had overlooked him started noticing his focus, his problem-solving abilities, and the quiet confidence he now carried. Peers who had dismissed him as ordinary began to look at him with curiosity, even admiration, though not all of it was easy to navigate. Malik understood that change was not linear. Recognition came in fits and starts, sometimes paired with jealousy or subtle resentment. Still, the experience with the millionaire remained a touchstone, a moment proving that skill and integrity could pierce through doubt and prejudice. It wasn't just about the tire anymore. It was about being seen, being valued, and learning to hold space for himself in a world that often tried to shrink him. Outside of school, Malik applied the lessons he had learned in every corner of his life. He helped neighbors with chores, tutored younger kids, and began exploring interests that had once seemed inaccessible. The mentorship from the man taught him more than practical skills. It taught him the unspoken ways the world could test him, the subtle biases that could block progress, and the resilience required to navigate them. Each small success, each moment of recognition reinforced a growing understanding that the barriers placed by society were real, but not insurmountable. That determination, courage, and talent could carve pathways even where doors seemed permanently closed. Through it all, Malik carried a dual awareness: gratitude for the opportunities he had been given and a keen consciousness of the injustices that persisted around him. He realized that his growth was not just personal, it was a chance to influence others, to show that merit and effort could exist anywhere in anyone, regardless of background or skin color. The encounter that began with a flat tire had become more than a random act of kindness. It was a pivotal moment, a catalyst that had unlocked his potential, reshaped his perspective, and instilled a sense of purpose. Malik understood now that life would continue to test him, that prejudice and doubt would not vanish, but the tools he had gained, the skill, the mentorship, the recognition, had given him a voice and a path forward. Looking back, Malik never forgot that hot afternoon, the hiss of the car's flat tire, the sharp glare of the world's doubt. That one moment, so small, so seemingly insignificant, had become a turning point, a testament to the quiet power of courage, skill, and persistence. Life had not promised him fairness, yet it had offered opportunity to those bold enough to seize it. In a society that too often judges by appearance, Malik's story reminds us that talent, kindness, and determination are universal currencies, unbound by skin, wealth, or status. What he learned is simple but profound: a single act of service, done with integrity, can ripple outward, changing not just one life, but countless others who witness it, who hear it, and who dare to dream beyond the limits imposed on them.